Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where I spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both a material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today I'm welcoming a self-proclaimed grandma millennial who's revolutionizing the retreat space in northern Michigan. From her first floating house project to her current ambitious ridge-top development, she brings a refreshing perspective on building without outside investors and doing things her own way. As someone who's flipped houses, built unique properties, and learned to trust her design instincts, she's now embarking on her most ambitious project yet, creating an intentional retreat space where groups can disconnect from the world and reconnect with nature. For anyone interested in the nitty-gritty of financing creative projects, navigating zoning challenges, or building on difficult terrain, this episode offers candid insights into the reality of developing unique properties. We'll explore everything from the importance of novelty in saturated markets to the courage it takes to build something different, and why sometimes the best business strategy is simply following your own creative vision. Let's do it. It's great to meet you. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
You too. I'm kind of fangirling a little bit because I've been following you. Well, I started following Pete initially, and then obviously, I know. And so, big fan of his. And then when you started your build, I was just looking for all the people that were building with him. And so I've kind of seen you from the beginning, and I was working on a different project at that time too. So it's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. I'm excited for this one because it's a little bit different. I mean, you have extensive history in the short-term rental space, which is where we're going to start because I want to hear a bit more
Okay.
about all the work that you've done there. But really, the reason that I was most excited to have you on the podcast was your recent project, and you are in the thick of it. And
Yeah, for sure.
when we started messaging about that, I was also thinking about a multi-unit property. So some of the things you were talking about, it's like, oh my
Ooh.
God, this is so real. This is so hard. And I want to
Yeah.
dig into some of that because I think we've had a lot of hosts with multi-unit properties on the podcast this season, and they're amazing and successful, but they also make it sound a little bit easy. Not all of
Yeah.
them.
I think what I've found is the ones that make it look easy are the ones that are buying pre-existing properties
Mm,
and they're grandfathered in. So
yeah.
I've found it's incredibly hard, at least in Michigan where I'm from, to do the multi-unit new build.
Yeah. And I think some that make it look easy also have investment money, which you have been very
Uh-huh.
clear about not taking any investment money. I also was trying to avoid taking investment money, and that does make it a lot harder. But let's back up a little
Yeah.
bit because I feel like very few people, although some do, but very few start with multi-unit. That is kind of an intimidating leap. And
Yeah,
so
for
I want
sure.
to hear a little bit more about where and how you built the confidence to be thinking about something bigger. When did you first start kind of dipping your toes in the world of short-term rentals?
Yeah, so I had been flipping houses in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I'm from. I really like small houses because it's something I feel confident in tackling myself. And
Yeah.
then project managing, the stuff that I haven't quite learned yet. So
Mhm.
I probably started that in 2015 was
Okay.
when me and my husband kind of started together. We had a baby at home and we bought a house across the street when the market hadn't quite shot up in Grand Rapids yet. And so we would kind of go back and forth late nights, just one person home, one person over renovating. And so we started that, did that for about 5 years. And then in 2020 was when I kind of got the confidence to do my first build on my own. So I started in a little town called Saugatuck, which is on the lake shore of Lake Michigan, just south of Grand Rapids.
Mhm.
And I had noticed a gap in experience in Michigan with floating houses and houseboat type structures.
Oh.
So it was New Year's Day. We drove into a marina in Saugatuck and I saw one floating house in there. And it was the first time I'd ever seen that in Michigan. So,
Had you seen it
I know,
elsewhere? Had you, like, traveled
yeah.
and
Oh
seen them?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Pacific Northwest and then in
Mhm.
Toronto area. And it's usually in areas where the harbors don't freeze over. We typically,
Okay.
we don't have either fast enough flowing water or something, but most of our harbors usually freeze. So I think that mixed with Michigan just being a tricky place for creative and innovative ideas. I don't know what it is, but they're scared of change, is what I found. So
Are you
I
from
started
Michigan
that.
originally? You grew
Yeah.
up there? Okay. This is,
Yep.
like, your background. Okay. Yeah, I know
Yep.
nothing about
Grew up.
houseboats, so that makes sense. Pacific Northwest, I can
Neither did
see them
I.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought, holy cow, this is going to be novel, and it's a small space, which I felt really comfortable with. I grew up on the water, so I knew enough about marinas and boating to feel like, okay, this is a really tricky build, but I feel like I know enough to do it safely and within this kind of marina culture. So I found a tiny house builder in Michigan, which there are very few because they're not legal in a lot of areas of Michigan.
Mhm.
Um, and started working. This was like his first big build too, so we just became fast friends.
How did
He's out
you
of
know? I've talked to so many people recently struggling to find builders. How did you know it was his first build? So it's not like he's like, "Look at all these builds I've done." How did
He
you
had done
know?
one. Yeah, so he had a kind of a spec tiny that was in his warehouse, and I went to go see it. I'm a big stickler on like finish work, and I like to have a good looking product at the end. So I like a lot of control myself in the past where I can be in control of like even just caulking. It's like people are so bad at caulking.
My god,
And
you and my
so
husband would get
just
along.
so I just took a leap of faith with him. This was something new for both of us. He's about my age, so I felt like, well, I feel like I'm going to get a good deal because he's on the ground up, I'm from the ground up, and so we're kind of just diving in together. So it
Yeah.
was really was like a fake it till you make it. I tend to be a little overconfident, and probably
Good.
I'm like the upper millennial,
Yeah.
grandma millennial. So lots of confidence, but I felt like I'd build my skill set enough to know how to project manage it, and then budget. So we just started. We built that through basically like the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, and then the world kind of shut down as we were just about to get it in the water, which was really scary. But
Turns out
luckily,
that's
like,
great timing though.
oh my, yeah. But they in Michigan, like everything, they had shut down short term rentals, like
Oh,
right as we were launching.
yeah.
So it was really scary. This was all personal. I invested our personal finances in it. Um, and then, like, right as we hit the water, things opened up. So we sold out that first season, which I know you've experienced success with Cozy Rock as well in that way. But I think the novelty of it was what I learned right then and there. It was like novelty is key.
Yeah.
We were in an area that already had kind of a built-in short-term rental market. It's a really like cute Chicago, it's north of Chicago. We
Yep.
get all that traffic.
Yep.
Um, so that was like, wow, I did it. I don't know how I did it, but here we are. So I ran that for 2 seasons, and
Can
then
I
I'm
pause
kind
for
of,
1 second before we
yeah,
move on to what happens next?
yeah,
I am still thinking about where you talked about the confidence and how the confidence, like, really because I mean, maybe that's an elder millennial thing, but I'm also an elder millennial,
all right, all
and
right,
I struggle constantly with the confidence piece of, "Is this good enough? Are people happy enough?" Right? Like, and I think I err on the side of second guessing everything, and going into
okay,
real estate, I do think, and especially builds, it does require confidence in your vision. You have to
mm-hmm,
believe so strongly that what you are
yeah,
picturing is what people want. Did
yep.
you figure that out through the first reno? Because you had only done one reno at that point, right? Like,
I
where do
had
you think that
done yeah, I had done some flips, and typically what I had done was stage them to some capacity upon selling them, and then I would often sell the furniture and stuff with it, and I knew that it showed well on the page. People would often buy the furnishing. So, I think I just with every little project that I did, I gained confidence in
okay.
my aesthetic and my ability to kind of deliver something that people would like. I even
Yep.
said to my husband that I will only ever be my only client because I do trust that I can build something that someone would like, but
Yeah.
I don't want to work with someone else's opinions. I'm kind of an awful
Yeah.
employee
Yeah.
because I
Same.
I just like to have the ownership over things and be decisive on my own. So I don't know where that comes from in terms of I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so I think maybe
Uh,
that like jump into it and just be resourceful and do it is a little bit in my blood.
were
But
your parents both
otherwise,
entrepreneurs?
my dad and my uncle bought like a small pre-existing business and built that. My other aunts and uncles have like a really successful chocolate business that's nationwide,
Okay.
and they've kind of started on the ground floor and worked their way up. And
Yeah.
so, and like some are in hospitality. So it's definitely been part of my family that it's been okay to be your own boss and to kind of have a vision and take it and run with it.
I don't think that can be overvalued when we talk about it because I do think I've heard stories from other people, well, myself included, where my family discouraged me from my first project and my second
Okay.
project because they were so risk averse. They had come
Mhm.
from steady W-2 jobs. If looking back, I was the first one in my entire family, I think, to start my own business or do something on my
Wow.
own. And so to have family who not only show you it's possible, but also like encourage you is so valuable for that confidence piece, I would think.
Yeah. Yep. And they did think I was a little crazy at first. You know, the risks that I take, I feel are calculated, and I am a numbers person as well. So I felt like I would run the worst case scenarios, and if I could still be okay with that, then. But if the best case scenario was like, holy shit, like I can pull this off,
Yeah.
that was like the reward was there. And even the worst case scenario I could swallow and be like, we're not going to go bankrupt. We'll just pick up the pieces and learn from
Yeah.
it. And I kind of always feel like, even though all my projects haven't been like big wins, um, they've, I can take the lessons and glean the, information and
Yeah.
never really see it as a regret at all.
Yeah. So leading up to that first houseboat, you had multiple proof points where you would run the
Hmm.
numbers and then seen yourself either meet or outperform or survive what you had
Yeah.
figured out. So that helps to
Yep.
build that confidence. And hearing from people who tour a house that you flipped and be like, this is beautiful, has to build that
Hmm.
reinforcement of my
Hmm.
vision. Okay, people are on board with this. At least the right people are on board
Yeah.
with this. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that, and not only was I like building confidence in my aesthetic, but just my skill set in general with being able to crunch numbers and project
Mm.
manage, and building the network of people that I knew that could do X Y Z that I
Yes.
couldn't do myself.
So important. Okay, so you were saying before I cut you off, 2 years after that, so you launched it, found pretty wild success with that in
Yeah,
those first 2 years, and so then what did
yeah.
that lead you to next?
So ultimately, my marina, because somebody saw what I was doing, and someone with big money was like, "Ooh, this is a cool idea," and they tried to develop their own basically marina with 4 of these units down the river. The
Mhm.
whole town got up in arms. Felt like it was again just a little tough because it wasn't very accepted, something new. So they got shut down, which in turn caused my marina to not allow rentals anymore. So I had to sell that property because ultimately I wasn't going to use it myself. It was
Right.
meant to be an investment property. I ended up selling that, and somebody's now just using it personally. So that was
That's
the
so frustrating.
yeah, it's a bummer, but again, I like to free up the liquid to be able to kind of move on to something new. So that allowed for that, and then I kind of did a big project out on Lake Michigan, which is
Okay, can I
incredible if
ask a
any.
question
Yeah.
about that transfer? Did you do a 1031 exchange?
I didn't, because the floating house, I never got certified basically to be a houseboat. So everything had to be in cash. So it was considered personal property rather than
Okay.
like an actual
Yeah.
structure that I could flip. I have
Okay.
not done a 1031 exchange. So I would be interested
Okay.
to learn more about.
Me
I
neither, and
usually,
we're trying to
yeah,
figure it out. So I'm like I'm
okay.
always like,
You have
"Did
a
you have you
lawyer?
done one?" Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out 1031 exchanges, but have not done that yet.
Okay, nor have I. So it's
Okay.
something that my sister has done, but I usually have a little gap between my projects, so I don't have anything in mind to quick like roll it over to.
It requires you to be, like, ready to jump straight into the next one, which
Yeah.
is just as on a human level, exhausting
Mhm.
to think about. Like, we're not always ready to make decisions that
Yeah.
quickly, which I find really hard. I don't know why we don't have a little bit more time, but anyway,
Yeah.
neither here nor there. Okay, you move on to Lake Michigan, a bigger project there. What did you do next?
Yep. This was unfortunately at the height of lumber as it was just
Mhm.
skyrocketing, and I inherited kind of a stinker. So this was one of my favorite projects, but definitely not a win. It was like major retaining walls, major deckings, like all up this dune. So that really killed me, or I would have done fine. Um, but ultimately,
Retaining walls are the biggest money
ugh,
suck I've ever discovered in a rental.
in a dune, I mean, you're
I
just
can't
nothing solid to
imagine.
grab onto. It was
I
nuts,
can't
but
imagine.
it
How do you
was.
even do that?
So Lake Michigan is like, if you haven't ever been, it's incredible. It's like an ocean, but no sharks and no jellyfish, and so it's just really like seen as a prized possession here. And so we were right across from the lake with like access, and then just this panoramic view of
Mm.
water as far as the eye can see. So it was really fun to do. We kept it for a little over a year, but it was such a money suck that like again I didn't have any liquid to do anything else with. So
Yeah.
ultimately sold that one, but again sold it fully furnished. That was like I learned so much. And it was so beautiful, and I really like kind of the vintage cottage vibe. I don't like shiny new, like it to feel a little lived in.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that
I'm
was
with
really
you.
fun getting to source everything and see that, and like people really liked the what I created, and so that gave me even more confidence even though the money, the dollar amount wasn't the big win, it was the experience and just the validation of like,
Yeah.
yeah, you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I want to dive into your current project, which was that the
Mhm.
next one after that?
There
What?
was a so there's I'll give a short version of the interim. So then I bought some land up in another beautiful area in northern Michigan. I was going to do that's where my multi-unit vision started, and I'd been hitting zoning, like all over Michigan. I had a big swatch of land that I was interested in, but ultimately, Michigan makes you do any kind of multi-unit as a campground unless you have like big lawyers who can maybe argue for a resort type thing where, I just don't have that kind of money to invest in
Yes.
that. So I've
Yes.
always had budget in mind. So the loophole that I found was to basically do a single family home, but in a really unique shape. So everything had to be attached, but I wanted it to be like separate quarters where I could host big groups
Uh-huh.
and have kind of this communal center area. So I was going to do that, and I ended up getting my builder's license to be able to be my own builder on that. And I did that for financial purposes because if you are the builder, you can finance it yourself as the builder rather than having to, if you're trying to finance new construction, you have to have a builder on it. And so immediately I could save 15 to 20% by just being the builder myself. So started that process. That took 2 tries at the state level to because I don't come from the trades at large. It's like I
Yeah.
know what I know.
Yeah.
So it took some studying, but ultimately earned that builder's license. So ready to go, and then interest rates started spiking.
Yes.
It was kind of during that phase, and again, when you're building, there's probably a 12-month period where you're not uh, generating any revenue and you're just
Mhm.
carrying the debt. So as interest rates started to creep up, that got scarier and scarier to do.
Yeah.
So at that time, wasn't quite ready. Liquidated that property, and then now we're into the new property.
Okay. I feel like this interest rate thing, and maybe I'm just listening to the wrong places, but I don't feel like it's being talked about enough in the short-term rental
Hmm.
space. Like, I feel like everyone, the attitude, one project after the next, it's like, but I can't make the numbers work now
Hmm.
in the same way that as I've been thinking about, like, if we're going to sell one, what's the next project?
Hmm.
I'm running numbers on a variety of projects, and it is just much harder to make the
Yeah.
numbers work now. But I'm still talking to people who are jumping into short-term rentals right now because it's a big thing, and if it's their first one, these numbers feel normal to them, and I'm looking at
Mm.
them and I'm like, how, like a construction loan, if it's the interest, but the interest is now 9% on a second
Yeah.
property,
Yeah.
like
It's
that
nuts.
is
It's
it's
scary. It's every point is like $1,000 a month in interest. If
yes.
you look at that, like when you're, especially with this multi-unit I was gonna do, it's like that was close to $1 million property, and that's a hell of a lot of an interest. That's just a lot every month to carry. So
That's
when
right,
you
but we're
maybe,
looking
yeah,
at people who have done it a couple years ago, and we're
hmm,
like, "Oh, this is possible. This is what it can look like." And it's like,
hmm,
"Wait, but they didn't mention that their interest rates were maybe 4% when they did it,
hmm,
4.5%, and yours are double that." Like, it
yeah.
is not the
I
same business.
Yeah, we bought a cabin. I lied. We do have a cabin right now that I'm renting out, and we did buy it a year ago. And yeah, our interest rate is like 7% because
Yeah.
it's a secondary property.
Yep.
So I was never really making. I We're selling it now to finance this new project, and ultimately, I'm not really coming out much ahead. It's hard to make those margins when your
Yes.
your interest rate is that high.
That's right, and you can wait for a refinance, but we bought our primary home 2 years ago at a 6.75% interest rate, and our realtor, I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I can make this work," and our
Yeah.
realtor was like, "Don't worry." What did she say? She said, "Date the rate, marry the"
Yeah, you can
something,
refi is probably
because you
her.
can refi. Okay, well, 2 years later, I've been paying $1,000 a month in interest every month, and I'm like,
Yeah,
when is the refi gonna happen? Because it's
yeah,
looking
I
like at
know.
least another year or 2. That's 4
Yep.
years of paying that. I don't know. Like, yes, you can refi, but also be prepared that it might be 3 to 5 years before
Mhm.
you're gonna get a rate that you're imagining in your head. Maybe never. It might never go
Maybe
back
never.
down to what it
Yeah,
was. Okay,
yeah.
I have another question because my husband has accused me of being a house hoarder because I've built a lot of houses and I have only sold one, which was, my
Oh,
primary home, and
you're
so when
probably smarter than I am, really. That's
I
probably
don't
the
think
smarter
that's it.
long-term thing.
I don't maybe. For me, it's an emotional thing. It's that each
Mhm.
one has been in a place or the process of it feels emotional to me, and it's like, "This house isn't serving me anymore, but I just can't let go of it." But you have sold a lot, so it seems like you are very
I'm the
savvy and
opposite, Janice.
yeah, I like that. I need more of that though, of the, like,
Okay.
it served this purpose, I learned from it, and it's okay that someone else owns it now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sentimental about things, which I think is just a personality thing as well, but I do very much view it like things serve a purpose. And that time I drove past the lake house that I did, like, right across from Lake Michigan. I drove by that a few months ago and I saw everyone out on the deck enjoying themselves,
Mm.
and it was easy to be happy for them and feel like I created that for them and they get
Yeah,
to enjoy it now, even though it would be cool if it was mine. And I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. I can let it go, which again, I think it's more of a personality thing, but I just like to roll. I have another friend who we fight a lot about this model because he likes to hold on to things. And I'm like, but you need the money now. And
right.
so it's neither is wrong. And we've had these arguments and we're both just like, it's just a different approach. So
It
you're not
is.
wrong, Janice. I'm
Thank
not
you.
wrong.
But what it makes me think about is the podcast episode we did a couple weeks ago was on contentment, and it was this idea of, like, once you find one success, do you wanna just keep building more? But what you're doing is still satisfying that desire to build off of what you've
Mhm.
learned and do the next thing and apply things that you're discovering or try right? It still satisfies all those things with more contentment, it feels like, rather than stretching yourself too thin and trying like, I'm trying to manage all of them so that I can
Yeah.
keep them. So I think there's something actually really aligned with this idea of less is more with the way that you're doing it and still getting to like keep being really actively engaged in this space, right? And getting to
Yeah.
do these things.
To me, it's kind of a mental freedom. I like to keep life as simple as it can, but I
Mm,
have a really big thirst for expanding what my potential is and what I want to be able to apply my skill sets in. So
yeah.
I just get really restless if I don't have something for too long. Like if I was still doing the same first project, I'd be so bored by now because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have learned nearly what I've learned now. So
Right.
I, yeah, I think this project though is one that my husband has and I have come to conclude this is the one we are going to hold on to. It doesn't mean I don't get to do future projects because I know I'll have the itch at some point in the
Yeah.
next probably few years, but it doesn't I don't think I'll hold on to an unlimited amount of properties. I'm
Right.
not in it for growth of my monetary and my mental exhaustion. I'm just in it for sustainability and for like pure happiness of
Yeah.
me getting to like live out what I want to spend my time doing.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I wrote down from your pre-interview form that I really liked, and it feels like a good
Oh,
time to
thanks.
bring it up, um, because I'm always thinking about this, and you said so I hoard all my projects, right, and they're all there so I can still see them and touch them and feel good about it, and instead you said about your projects, you said, "I've gotten to know myself extensively throughout my projects. I've learned that self-employment is necessary for me to be happy. I've learned that I'm capable of building things with my own hands. I've learned that I have a strategic mind that can work through obstacles and develop plans of attack that are both budget conscious and effective. I've learned to trust my design eye and that the final product will resonate with the right people. I've learned to expect the unexpected. Nothing is as easy as it seems. I've learned that the only client I can have is myself." I love that. "And I've learned how important it is for me to have a supportive partner who's willing to trust me and take these risks with me." And it feels like you might not have all of the physical properties that you still own, but you've left with like all of this deeper understanding about yourself through the process. And I just think that's really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it was fun to fill that out because it just forced some reflection that I kind of known but I had never articulated. So that
Yeah.
was fun to fill out.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanna move on to the project that you're in the thick of right
Okay.
now. Before you start talking about, like, the details of it, can you start with a why? Like, why does a multi? Because it sounds like you've been trying to do this for a while.
Yep.
Why does a multi-unit property appeal to you? What are you trying to create with this? Like, what is the why behind it?
Yeah, I think um, because I really have valued community in my own life. I really see a gap in the market of places where groups of shared interests, or just whether it's like yoga retreats or therapeutic retreats, couples retreats, even corporate things, adventure groups, just the full gamut. There's really, as I look around Michigan, there's nothing that's geared specifically toward like a group of, maybe 10 to 20 people that want the aesthetic of a traditional like new Airbnb where
Mhm.
you have the amenities. There's just nothing that is out there that fills this need in Michigan right now that
Yeah.
I've seen. And so there's like large corporate group retreats in hotels and things like that. But in terms of a small space where there's shared amenities and communal focus, there just was a gap in the market. And it's something that I feel really drawn toward either curating. That's why the conscious cabin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved her interview because it was like,
Yeah.
she is me.
Yeah. She's the
But
best.
yeah, it sounds like she's a little closer in proximity geographically, which I knew might be an issue because the spaces in Michigan where they allow for this kind of thing, any kind of multi-unit campground, is very limited. And so northern Michigan is really the pocket of beauty, and then along the west coast. So location, I knew I wouldn't be able to be as quite of hands-on as I would hope, but I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to create the space and then allow just other people to host, and then I could host some. It's been a really big passion of mine to get people connected with nature and just strip down life to its simplest form. So that's kind of the vision. I wanted to create just a really peaceful place where small groups could come and disconnect. And I just wanted to be a part of creating a vision that I didn't see already out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm gonna share one more thing you wrote because I highlighted
Okay.
this one about the why. But you said, "I long to be contributing to the movement that bigger isn't better. Our kids need to be bored. Our adults need to be bored." Yes. This is when
Mm-hmm.
curiosity and creativity takes over. Fuck political division, bottom dollar thinking, and just plop us all out in a cabin in the woods to watch the spinning aspen leaves. We'd be better citizens of the world for it. I just think
Don't you
that's
think?
beautiful. I totally do. I think there are moments that some people have regular interaction with this and some people don't. And it reminds me of Meredith, who we had on the podcast, and she lives in a city and said a lot of people live in cities, and she called it a pigeon on a power line. Sometimes just you're on a walk downtown, but you see a pigeon on the power line and let yourself go to that space. But it's the
Mm,
same idea of like, watch the spinning aspen leaves. Like, take yourself out of this like hustle and bustle of what we're trying to create and produce and how much money we're trying to make, and just get out there and be bored. And I don't think there are
hmm.
enough places that encourage that.
Yeah. I try to this I know this is a little luxurious, but I try to hike probably like 5 times a week.
Mm,
We were just in Chicago the other night, and uh my husband and I were walking around downtown, and I was like, imagine how hard it would be here to try to just logistically go for a hike.
yeah.
And that was kind of breaking my heart a little bit, and it made me really grateful that we have a lot of green spaces around us. And so, but that's like just my rejuvenation time, is to just, yeah, right now it's insane. The colors are amazing. Like, just be in it. And
Yeah.
it just is so healing. And you notice all the little intricacies of how everything works together. I mean, it can't help but blow your mind and like get you to just forget about the mundane grind that you're in and be amazed by, if you really look at
Yes.
everything around you when you're out in nature.
Yes. This was the moment. So I was my the multi-unit property I envisioned in my head was very similar to what you're talking about. So I'm so glad that you're doing it. But for me, and part of this is because of how many properties I currently run, the moment where I gave up on it and I said, "You know what?
Mm.
Not now," was on a hike with my dogs. And it was
Okay.
because I was in that moment and I was just like, this is what I want more of. And if I do this, I'm going to be pulled in so many more directions and be
Yeah.
doing all of these things that will ultimately take me further from that.
Mhm.
But we need people like you who create these. And this was the deep belief so that more people can escape their life and have those moments, right? So I
Yep.
love what you're doing. For me, it was just like,
Thank you.
I think I might fall apart if I have to do something this big right now.
Yeah, I think if I had other things going on right now, it would feel a bit much. Just the back end planning,
Yeah.
the I'm in the infrastructure phase right now. I knew I'd have to pivot a lot throughout this process because I have a really unique piece of land, and again, the regulations that I would come up against. So I have pivoted quite a bit in my original vision of this particular property, but I'm still excited about what I'm building,
Yeah.
and it's a much more tangible price tag at this point. But I've learned so much, and I know I can take that on if I want to kind of do the full vision at some point.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about the land. So it sounds like you've bought land. I want to know like
Mhm.
where we're going to get into some of the details now. I want to know like where you are in the process and what might have happened prior to that that led you to where you are. So you had this vision for a
Yeah.
multi-unit property. Where
Mhm.
yeah, where are you in that process right now?
Okay, so it probably has been about 2 years of searching for land. There's been the almost maybe 4 or 5 times where I've
Yeah.
put together a full business plan and just would come up with, like, one property, the access road wasn't wide enough. So
Yeah.
that alone, I knew either I was in charge of paying at the township level for whatever bill that came to widen it, basically double what it was.
Yep.
So just things like that that would come up, or just wasn't quite ready financially to pull the trigger. So again, I had kind of a big swath of land that I was open to. Um, and then it's funny enough, the land that I sold that I was going to do my original multi-unit, I'm just down the road from now. So it
Okay.
felt good to kind of be back in that space because
Be
it's a
close
place I
by.
really love.
When you
So
say
we
you made a
found.
business
Okay.
plan, I'm gonna pause there. I'm gonna get in the weeds on some of this because I know people
No,
are
I love
wondering
it.
and I'm wondering. Okay, so when you say you made a business plan for, like, each piece of land you were looking at, this
Oh yeah.
feels so intimidating, and I'm not sure enough people are intentional about this. I don't know, I could be wrong. What did that look like? What numbers were you running? How were you trying to like, how deep did you go into that before making an offer on the land? Or, like, was this after you made an offer and you were trying to figure out if you were
No
gonna
way.
close? Okay.
Before. Yeah, for
Wow,
sure
okay.
before. I like to do a lot of due diligence just because I know it's easy to misstep. I've seen it done, where people get in and they don't realize how expensive it is or what obstacles they might come across. So, what I typically would do would be to do a rough budget of what I thought the build out would cost.
Yeah.
I toy with a few different designs, whether it's like fixed structures or tiny houses on wheels. So I'd kind of run the ROI on a few different versions of that property. And then I would look at local markets to see what roughly rentals were going for in terms of nightly rates and occupancy.
How did you study
Excuse
that? Did
me.
you use a tool for that, or did you do it just by, like, scrolling
I'm just an
Airbnb?
Airbnb,
Okay.
yeah, just a scroller, and then I think a lot of people look at the average nightly rate rather than going, in different seasons and checking and kind of doing hypotheticals. So I would do a lot of that just to see, and I whatever I would come up with, I knew I could push the envelope just a hair because I knew whatever I was going to build was going to be
Yes.
kind of the most desirable. That was my goal, was to
There's the
edge out the
confidence. I love
competition.
that.
So yeah, did that with probably 4 different properties, and then just would run into little logistical errors. But yeah, if I hadn't done my due diligence on how wide your access road needs to be, I could have had this land and then had a $50,000 road
Right,
widening fee.
right.
So
It's not
it's
insignificant.
right. So, and even just thinking through, so when I budget, because I've done a lot of residential, wells, septics, all that stuff, I had a rough idea on flat land, but this is the land I ended up on. I knew there would be challenges because it's really special. We don't get a lot of elevation in Michigan. So, this is a unique part of Michigan where there's big ridges and then it's the Jordan Valley down below, and there's the
Mm,
Jordan River that runs through it. So, the views are spectacular, but I've never built on elevation like this. And so I knew there were going to be challenges, and I knew my budget was probably off because I'm used to flat land,
yeah,
residential, running power at the bottom of a ridge from a pole all the way up a ridge. I've learned a lot about voltage drop and infrastructure
yeah.
challenges and things like that I never thought I'd have to learn. So I ended up with this land because, like I said, with the floating house, novelty is key. And so for Michigan, this particular piece of land is very special. And so I knew that alone, having a great location and having something that was novel
Yeah.
in the location itself would be. Sorry, I lost my earpiece.
I love
Just
it.
gonna
That's the
keep going
third
with it.
time you've lost your AirPod, and I love it. It's so, humanizing because the same thing happens to me, and I'm like, "This is really, really good to see."
So ultimately, yeah, that's why I chose the land that I did. I'm back in an area I'm familiar with and really love. And I have the novel piece of land that I think is the perfect backdrop for creating what I envision.
So you're in Grand Rapids. How far is this from where you live full time?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 hours. How far are
Oh,
you
that's not
from
bad.
Cozy Rock?
13.
Holy
So
moly.
2.5 sounds great. Our cabin in
Yeah.
Boone is 2.5 hours away, and it's so doable. It's like you can do it in a day if you need to, and Sean does sometimes for repairs, but for a
Oh yeah, I've
weekend,
been doing it. Yeah.
you're there for a
I've been
late
doing it.
dinner.
Yeah. I've been probably once a week popping up. So I've been up there weekly just doing day trips because I got kids in school during the day. And then, yeah, I'll throw my husband on kind of the pickup duty. And again, he's self employed too. So we have some flexibility in our
So
schedule,
nice.
which is really nice.
But it sounds
So
like
yeah,
you do a lot of the short-term rental side of things, you do
it's all
mostly
me.
solo. Yeah, okay, which
Yeah.
is very
Yep.
relatable for me. Like, I manage Sean to do some things, but it is not his thing at all. It is very much
Right.
mine.
Yeah.
So
My
I really
husband has
related to
kind
you
of,
saying that.
well, and that's nice that like you can even manage Sean. The deal is basically the projects are mine, and so anything having to do with it, he's pretty much, he's got his own business going on. So
Yeah.
it's I don't mind being an island mostly. A lot of people would get lonely, but I like a lot of alone time and I like a lot of independence, so it suits me.
Yeah. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Okay, so you have the land now, and now you're to this vision creating stage, which I'm sure some of this happened before because you want the land to fit your vision of what you're doing. But I'm kind of curious about this part, and then we'll move back into logistics. But like when you think about, at your core that what you're going to create is something special. How are you putting that onto paper? How are you like branding this? How are you like even in terms of deciding what designer you want to use for the houses or who you're using for the houses, all of that comes back to this overall vision. How do you
Mhm.
organize those thoughts? What does that look like? Are you hiring someone to do the branding? Are you doing that?
No, ma'am.
You're doing
Yeah,
all of it.
it's all me. I know. I like a lot of different things, and so I probably should be outsourcing more. I'll say that. But I'm for budget purposes and just my own expansion of what I like feel like I'm good at. I like to keep pushing the boundaries of what I'm potential, my own potential.
Yeah.
So I haven't brought a lot of people in yet. I was going to work with a friend on, he's an amazing muralist. So I've been
Mm,
looking for excuses to work with him for a long time. So I was
yep.
going to have him do a lot of hand painted signs and things like that. But ultimately, I think my budget and then his schedule is not quite allowing for it right now.
Yep.
So yeah, I had a couple of different units that I was looking at. So I'm doing all the design, I'm doing all the project management. I really am like a ridiculous one woman show, for better or for worse. It gets a little stressful at times, but I feel capable enough that I can do it. So yeah, I'm working with engineers, the electrical engineer through our energy provider, all the well and septic people, all the excavators. I've partnered with a company called Zook Cabins.
I saw
and
that
they're
on
out
your
of yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah. So they've been amazing. I did a little site visit down there to look at a couple of their options and then ended up doing they have some small units on wheels that ultimately with zoning just ended up being the easier option. So going with those. And then the thing I don't, this is what I'm really jealous that you've figured out is that the online social,
Mm.
it's not my forte. I'm intimidated by that. I'll say that. So
Can we talk about that
getting
for a
the,
little bit?
yeah,
Because I was looking at your Instagram in preparation for this, and I was like, "Oh, it looks like she must not have started yet," which I do think is kind of where you're at, right? Have you broken
yeah,
ground?
we've broken ground in the sense that like our infrastructure's all mapped out, my well's in, but yeah, we're breaking ground next Monday officially
Okay.
on like trenching and site planning and all of that. So
Okay.
yeah, we're really preliminary, and I the only thing I know how to do is to work with influencers to come stay, but I am really at a loss for like how to effectively spread the word initially.
Okay. Well, can we talk about that a little bit?
Hmm. Give me
Because
your knowledge.
oh, well, I don't know that I have knowledge, but I know what I would wanna see as someone following you at this
Okay.
stage of the process. Like, for example, your well is already in. I don't see any posts about your well here.
Oh, is that
That is
I'm like
interesting
yeah, okay.
content. When I was working on the multi-unit property, wells and septic were, like, 2 of the things where I was just like, "Wait, do I need 1 well? Do I need multiple wells? Do I need 1?" Okay, if I put them closer together, I can get away with 1 well and 1 septic, which is cheaper, but then they lose privacy, right? This was, like, a big thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, for sure.
the thing that Sean makes fun of me about, but I'm constantly saying everything is content. So whatever I am working on, I'm like, "Okay, which is the best format for me to share this?" And so
Okay.
maybe you can think about it like this, but like, okay, you're working on the well. And the thing about wells, as you know, is like it's like playing the lottery. You
Oh,
just
yeah, this is our
don't
second
know.
thrill. Yeah,
Right. You
yeah.
just don't know. Jandy has one hell of a story about a well. And like it could be a $7,000 investment or a
Mhm,
$40,000 investment. And so
mhm.
to me, I'm like, this is like the most nerve-wracking part of a build. People should be sharing more about wells. That is good content, right? So
But
it's
how do you get it out there? Like, how do you get people to actually I can create the content, but, like, what's gonna drive
yes.
the
Okay.
eyes?
So I always think about a sales funnel, right? Which is like at the very top is find and follow. And then below that is like know, like, and trust. So it's like the
Okay.
first step is finding people, like is reaching people, which we can talk about. But then there's also this part of the funnel where you have how many followers you have right now? You have
Oh gosh.
34 people who are like following you. No, that's not insignificant. Think about if you were in a room of 35 people. That is a big room of
Yeah,
people.
wow, that's a lot of friends.
Right, and those 35 people are following you because they wanna know what's going on, and they are probably like, "Has the well gone in yet? I don't know what's going on with the well, but I really need to know what's happening."
I need
Right?
to know.
I need to know. And so, I feel like there's multiple places you can post. Your stories is really good for knowing, liking, and trusting and building relationships with people, and it's low risk. You can put your face on camera, but, like, strangers aren't seeing it. It's your 35 friends who are seeing it, and that
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
safe, right? Where you can share some
okay,
of the, like, other stuff. But if you made a reel about it, reels are what Instagram pushes, right? So
okay,
reels are more apt to put you on the explore page where random people can find you. And
okay.
that's how you get the find and follow. That's how you bring new people into the funnel. And then all of a sudden you're 35 followers. Now you're in a room of 70 people who are waiting to find out about your septic system,
So
right?
have you used, like, tags or hashtag like, how are have you used any specific things to kinda get your word out there?
Yeah, so during our build, I will say I did not use many reels during our build despite being a videographer. It was like a newer feature and I didn't quite know how to use them and it just felt intimidating. So I did a couple. But what I did a lot of was hashtags. And the people that I wanted to follow were people in Maine. I wanted to build relationships with their
Mhm,
community. So like hashtag Freeport, Maine, hashtag visit Maine, I
mhm.
use on almost every post. And as a result, local businesses started to find me because they followed,
Oh.
if they're a business, they followed Freeport, Maine or Visit Maine. And my posts would show up daily. And they're like, who is this cozy rat cabin who is showing up every day on this
So
hashtag?
you'd used volume too, like, you would crank out a lot?
Yeah, I posted
Okay.
every day during the build, but it was
Oh, wow.
very, very different. It was just I hired someone to go out to the property and take photos once a week from 4 specific spots and then anything creative they wanted to do. And so they would
Okay.
give me 15 to 20 photos a week. So that was 7 posts.
Yeah.
But what I
Yeah.
would do is they'd show one post and then in the caption, I would be talking about like, okay, what is significant about the progress that was made this
Yeah.
week? What decisions am I making? And so that would find new people. But then in my stories, I would talk about all of the stuff that I was doing and thinking about whatever, like
Okay.
everything you're doing today is content probably where you're working on this build. And so just thinking
Yeah,
about
I
how you're
probably just need
sharing
to
it.
be yeah, I probably just need to be because to me it's who cares about yeah, this boring stuff, but maybe people do.
Not only do they care, but they are more than willing to weigh in with their opinions. So just whether or not
Yeah.
whether or not which you might not like, but whether or not you're gonna listen to their opinions, ask for them. Like
Okay.
everything from lighting to layout of the house to couch options to paint. My favorite paint colors I got from a follower on Instagram who just said, "Hey,
Okay.
we found the perfect white. Stop your search now." And I was like, "Okay." And I've
Is it
literally never.
Chantilly Lace by Benjamin Moore?
No, is that your favorite?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mine is
that is really
Sherwin-Williams Snowbound, which came from a follower on Instagram,
Oh,
and literally it's
okay.
in our house now in 3 of our rooms, like, I don't even look, that's just what I use. So it can be really helpful, and then when you don't want you can just, "Oh, thanks for your feedback," and not implement it, and
Mhm.
that's fine, but that
Yeah.
engagement is gonna tell Instagram that people are invested, which they
Okay.
are. You know what I mean?
Alright.
It's like all of that stuff is content, and then we only and to be clear, by the end of our build, I think we had a couple thousand followers. It wasn't anything significant. Though, Jess, a room of several thousand people is
Right.
not
Holy cow.
insignificant, right?
Right.
But then those several thousand people were the first ones to book stays because they'd been following
Okay.
the whole build and they believed in it and they had a say in
Mhm.
it and they, wanted to see what it looked like in real life. So even if it's a
Yeah.
couple hundred, and it'll be good for you. It documents like, although for you, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you document it on your Retreat North page or you document it on your Just Building Things page.
What would your recommendation be? That's what I'm like, do I duplicate everything or
I would document most of it on the Just Building Things page, but I
okay.
would add, it would incentivize me to do reels or carousel posts where you can invite a collaborator, and I would just collaborate with your second one, with the Retreat
Okay.
North one. And
Okay.
then it's showing up in both places, but I do think long run, you wanna build the Retreat North page because
Mhm.
that's obviously gonna be valuable to the property, but
Yep.
long term, the Just Building Things, that's a good name,
'Cause
and you
I
have a
yeah.
everything you should own that because I think there's potential to really grow that one, and that can, if
Okay.
you do end up selling this property or doing a next project, it's like people are
Yeah.
following you in that journey.
Yeah.
But the collaborator feature is really valuable because you can basically post them on both and people will see them there.
Yeah.
And then I
Thanks,
think
teacher.
yeah, then once it launches, the influencers and things like that, that stuff you would put just on the property page. But for the
Okay.
building process, I would maximize your personal one too. But we
Okay.
wanna go on this journey with you, especially me, like, I'm not
Yay.
doing this property anymore, right? So, like, it allows people to live vicariously and learn through
Okay.
you for whatever they're doing wherever they are. That is very valuable.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, it's hard to know. Everyone's got these shiny pages and it's hard to know what people are gonna care about. So I
Shiny is out.
appreciate
I mean, I'm being very real with you. Shiny is
yeah.
out. People have seen so much shiny. I tune out shiny. I don't pay
I'm
attention to
like
shiny.
allergic to the shiny and so I don't want to participate in the looking off in the distance,
Nope.
just ultra shiny. You're missing out on this. You want people to feel like they're missing out, but I don't not trying to make people miserable in their current life, but that they're
That's
not
right.
doing all these like lavish things.
That's right. And we are starting to realize that about our own lives. People are starting to unfollow those accounts. I mean, for a marketing page, sure, that's fine. Show them how wonderful your
Mhm.
property is. But what we want to follow on a daily basis on Instagram is other humans doing hard things and figuring out as they go. Like, those are
Mhm.
us. That's us. That's who we want
Yeah,
to be following. You are that person.
yeah,
And
that's
shiny is out when it comes to that. So, I mean, that's where I think builds can be so real.
yeah, yeah. So it's been fun. Yeah, I'm
So,
in the
yeah, where are you
preliminary.
now? You're about to
Okay,
clear the
so
land.
yep, so another interesting thing, which I think I appreciate your transparency on, is the finance portion and like how do you finance stuff like this. So initially, I looked into like an SBA loan, and ultimately those are like 3 to 6 months before you can get any financing, and the hoops that you have to jump through are really extensive.
Yeah.
And then the interest rates are quite high. So
Like
I
how
was a little
high?
off of like 11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, my husband's in real estate, and we've kind of like lived pretty simply. We've ridden the wave of real estate in our area to where like we had paid off our primary last year, which was like a
Amazing.
goal, lifelong goal, adult goal.
Yeah.
So I knew we had equity in this house. So cash is king. I wanted no one to be able to tell me how to spend the money or restrict me on, you know, me having to be accountable to people. So ultimately, we ended up doing a cash out refi on our house and pulled out as much equity as we could. And then I'm in the process now of getting a little bit of extra liquid. We paid cash for the land, and I'm going to refinance that and pull some liquid out of that to get me to the finish line. So all self-funded. I realize that's a luxury that we've ridden the market in Grand Rapids to where we've like built our equity. Not everyone's been able to do
Yeah.
that. Haven't taken out any family and friends money on this project. Haven't worked with a bank specifically for this project other than pulling out the money from our house. So that has freed me up a little bit to just be able to spend the money where I need to without having to like send reports and
Yep.
budget lines to everybody. It's
So
like I
nice.
can run my own documents. So that's that's been a challenge to get creative to figure out. It's easy that I just told you what we did, but to get to that point took a lot of figuring out and running different numbers on different funding options, and then ultimately landing here. So
So
yeah,
SBA loan was one. Did you look into what were the other things that you looked into? Just for folks who might not have the
yep,
cash on hand, what are some other options?
yep. I went with a traditional commercial loan at one point and shouldn't have according to what our assets are, but got denied for that because we were considered a startup.
Mm,
And ultimately, the bank didn't want to take a risk on that. So
yep.
couldn't get funded through a traditional commercial loan. And then, then I pivoted to the SBA. And then I knew, so another timing thing, I'm going to be seasonal. So I have a season I'm trying to hit. And
Yeah.
so if I can't hit my season in April where we start, I start losing quite a bit of
Right.
money. So with an SBA loan, that's 3 to 6 months out before I can even start
Right.
paying
And
any
then you missed
bills.
that season.
And I missed the whole season, which means I'm carrying debt for a whole other year that I can't pay back or don't have any revenue stream. So just all those little factors of being strategic with timing. And if you typically like the glamping projects or the multi-unit like this, they take like 2 to 5 years typically with like big investment groups and stuff. So bless you.
Thank you.
I'm uh I'm trying to expedite it as much as I can just to get up and running so I'm not
Yep.
just carrying, 5 grand a month in debt that I just have to
Yes.
pay out of pocket.
We've heard this a lot recently this season of the podcast of just like
Okay.
how long it takes to make that money back. And that's what I've been hearing. It's like 3 to 5
Mhm.
years and is when you're starting to really see the profits.
Mhm.
But I also really like the idea that you can kind of grow as you go. So when you
Mhm.
launch in the spring, what is your goal? How many Zook cabins are you going to have? Are you doing glamping? Is it just cabins?
It's just the cabins on this particular unit. So I'm doing 4, and
Okay.
ultimately I'm doing 4 because anything over 4, you have to go through all the state regulations.
Okay.
So I have managed to I'm actually in a unicorn pocket that's unzoned, which is very rare in Michigan. So I haven't had to jump through a lot of township stuff, just health department. And originally I was going to build cabins, but then the building inspector gets involved,
Yep.
and that delays things, increases your budget. Ultimately, I liked more that model was to have fixed structures. But again, the budget and then the timeline just wasn't something that for this project I was ready to pull the trigger on. So went with the mobile units, and these are certified park models. So they've gone through all the certifications that they need to be on the road and kind of just moved wherever I need to.
So they just
I think
deliver them to you.
they do. Again, up a ridge, very difficult. So I've had
Yeah.
to think through how my land is shaped, how the ridge is shaped, how I can maximize the views because these
Yep.
particular units have the short side as a full wall of window, and you want that to be the best view.
But then on
And
a
so
ridge, you need
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
depth then.
yeah, yeah.
Darn it.
So I've had to be really strategic about thinking through, and then you have septic, so you can't drive those units over your septic. So just
Yeah,
really a lot of planning and thinking of how to move everything and when everything needs to be moved. And so yes, in theory, they're very easy to just on a piece of flat land just plop them on, and you basically need like what a full service RV site would need.
right.
Um, but up on a ridge, it's my budget's gone a little cuckoo with that. But
Yeah.
I feel like the payoff is going to be worth it.
Yeah, the novelty. I really like you
Mhm.
emphasizing that because I think that's true. I think
Mhm.
yeah, I think and it can come in a variety of ways. It could be the piece
Mhm.
of land, it could be the cabins that you're building, whatever, but I do
Yep.
think there needs to be something novel about it in an
Yeah,
increasingly crowded market.
for sure.
Um,
It is really, it's very heavily saturated, and so to do something, that's something my husband and I have always been good at together is trying to find the slight unique approach to something, and we've kind
yeah,
of taken that in all of our, he does real estate, so he does real estate in this like slightly different way than everyone else because he's a
yeah.
4 on the Enneagram, and that's yeah, that's important to him. So
I almost asked you your Enneagram number earlier. What is your Enneagram
3,
number?
baby,
Okay, that
big
doesn't
time
surprise
achiever.
me. Mhm. Okay, I like that. My husband is also a 3.
Okay, good man.
Yeah. Ah, there are no, he is a good man, to be clear, but there are parts of his 3-ness that
Challenging.
sometimes are hard for me, but I'm a 7, so you put 2 aggressive numbers together, and
Yeah,
that
it's a party.
it is a party in all kinds of ways, lots of times. Okay, so you have a 3 and a 4. What is your wing? Are you a 4 wing?
I don't know. I would probably, if I had to predict, I would say I'm a four wing, just because
Okay.
I do like that kind of like novelty, doing
Yeah,
something different, standing
yeah,
out. I have
yeah.
that element too.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up. We haven't talked about that a lot on the podcast, just novelty, but I think that is really important, especially with Instagram, where
Hmm.
prior novelty could have been within your region, right? And that's great. But
Hmm.
now Instagram feels like it's making everything smaller. So you might be doing something novel in your region, but it still feels not novel to you if you're
Right.
seeing it in other places. And so really thinking
Yeah.
about what is that novelty piece. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so when are they getting delivered? You have to do all of that groundwork. Do you have a delivery date for the cabins?
So we are trying to thread the needle of weather in Michigan where the ground is still frozen but you don't have the sloppy or the ice. So
Yeah.
they should be done around the end of the year, and they're currently in production right now. And then, so we're going to thread the needle of like January, February when that window opens up of frozen ground. And then ultimately, another thing I learned was I initially was thinking, okay, can trucks get these things up here on this ridge? And so I've been working with a couple different transport companies to figure that out. And ultimately, I'm having to, another expense is like rent this really particular skid steer where they can haul them up. So skid steers, they have like the bulldozer
Yes.
track. Yeah. So just things like that that
Carrying a
we just
house.
carrying carrying a house. They're small, they're on the smaller side. They're eight and
Yeah,
a half by 24. So it's not,
okay.
and they're about 10 to 11,000 tongue weight, add some on there. But so yeah, just figuring out all those little details. And then our infrastructure should be done by the end of the year. So I do have, once they're delivered January, February, I have like a month or so to kind of get everything else ready on property. I'm going to do some skirting, all your staging, kind of do a couple of trial runs with friends and family and get all the feedback.
Yeah, this is so exciting. Okay, wait, I have homework for you though.
Okay, I
Okay,
want to hear it.
do you have a drone?
I have hired somebody up there, and I did some pre, like when we first bought the land, like green season drone footage, and then I just did some fall, which is incredible. So I feel like, do I need to get my own drone?
Yeah, you do. Well, because
Okay.
for your own independent uses, you don't need to be licensed, so that's fine. And it's
Okay.
not rocket like you can teach yourself how to fly it in one day, but I
Okay.
when they are skid steering these cabins into
Yes.
place,
You're
you need
right.
to have a drone out. Those shots are gonna go crazy. People haven't seen
Yeah.
that. It's like Devin in Pacific Bid. He has like 800,000 followers, and I swear half of them came from the many shots he shared of like
Mm,
cutting doors out that dropped from the things, right? This is your
yeah.
moment to shine.
This is okay, noted. I will say when I had the floating house that I built in Saugatuck, I had a drone of the hairy boat ride pulling it over into
Yes,
place.
so you get
And
it.
that was like, oh, it was like, holy cow, we
Yes.
did it.
Okay, okay, so you have the same vision as me, but I feel like
Yeah.
I am gonna be waiting anxiously for the moment when you're
Okay.
delivering the cabins, and I just feel like you need to be there, and your role obviously is managing the whole operation, but also is capturing content of all of
And
it
I'm gonna be
because
like,
I know, but so are we, right? That's the thing. If you're feeling that way, we are gonna be right there
yeah,
with you, and that is like
yeah.
the kind of stuff that people wanna see.
All
Okay, do you
right,
have a couple
Janice.
extra minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because 'cause we're running over, but I still have some more questions.
That's okay.
Okay, so how much with Zook cabins, how much have because I know your vision is important part of this. How much have you gotten to impact the design of the interior of the cabins, or is it all really standard? Do you get to pick finishes? What does that look like?
I don't. And that, that's always a little bit of a bummer. They kind of come as they come. They don't work custom stuff. They kind of have a process. And this is a newer model, so there's only one other of this particular model that's been delivered in October. So I'm kind of like this pretty early on in the wing of this particular model.
What is the name of
So
your model? Because 'Cause I'm on their
it's
website.
the Studio Nook.
Okay. For anyone who wants to
So
look it up on the Zook website.
yeah, yeah, and they've been great to work with. Leon has been my rep, and so just amazing company to work with. Always personable, willing to answer any questions. So highly recommend them. They kind of started out in the log cabin space, and they're trying to
What it
maximize a
looks
little bit
like,
more in
yeah.
like the more modern kind of glamping type structures. So
Yep.
yeah, I haven't gotten to customize as much as I'd hope, but I feel like I can bring enough in. I'm Pendleton has always been like my one true love, and so really laying it on thick with the Pendleton and that kind of old camp feel.
Yes.
So sourcing a lot of vintage art, all my cutlery and plates and all that is all like Goodwill kind of pieced together sort stuff. So I
I
don't
love
like it
that.
to feel shiny new. I've just been like along the way collecting stuff, and yeah, so each one will have a hot tub, which will look out over the ridge. It's just going to be like a 3-person hot tub because there'll be 2 people per unit. And then I'm doing this a big sauna, like a 10-person sauna, and a shower next to it. But the sauna has a window that looks out over like the best view of the valley. So I'm going to do a yoga platform. We're up on the ridge, and then down at the bottom of the ridge, we have a beautiful creek that runs through it. And so I'm going to do a yoga platform kind of over top, almost like a bridge over that, where you can hear the water flowing. Yeah, so it's just going to be really special, and hopefully I'll do Blackstone so everyone can cook outside. I just want like everyone to be outside as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the last thing I wanna ask you, I'm just, like, looking at your Instagram as you're talking about this so that I can, like, start to envision exactly what this is gonna be like. This is an unsexy question that I ask a lot, but you've done so many of these projects and you're project managing so many pieces. Like, what are the systems that you use? One for organizing all of the pieces of like the builder, like you're navigating the septic, the well, who is the skid steer company that we're going to use? Like,
Yeah.
where do you organize all of that?
I don't have a lot of fancy tools, just a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of pages, documents, and checklists. And I try to maybe every couple of days just like revise everything, tighten it all up. So just a lot of working documents that I just over and over and over revisit, tighten it up, add
Yeah.
notes. I One really fun thing that I've started on this project is I have a notes sheet of everything that I'm learning. And
Oh.
so every little pivot I've had to make and why and what I would do different next time. So I think that's going to just be a fun little tool for me to look back at, and then just to have a central place of all my knowledge that I can take forward.
You could also make like a short ebook out of that for people who are embarking on projects like this and just wanna,
True.
like, learn from someone else's perspective. What about the design piece? Because creating when you have 4 cabins, creating cabins that have a cohesive feel, but also, like, each have their own unique feel, and
Mhm.
there's so many pieces, how do you begin to visualize that to know that what you're buying is all gonna go together?
Yep. So I, again, like I'm doing the same kind of Pendleton blanket. So the basics are the same in every unit. And then I'm doing some custom like artwork and pieces that are really going to pull different. So all like because I'm doing more collected dishes and things like that, all that's going to be different. And
Yeah.
then So mostly through artwork, and then just kind of what's out on display is kind of going to be the unique thing about each place.
And where do you store all this stuff? Like, while you're ordering and collecting all of it mid-build, where are you storing all of it?
So I feel really proud. This is the best I've ever done. Normally I've taken over, we have a 2-stall garage, and normally I've taken over like a whole stall. But now the benefit of the because these aren't custom and they don't have like an indoor living area, my furniture is really limited. So it's really just supplies and linens and things. But what I have is just a stack for each cabin in my basement, and I've started, I mean, it's all labeled. It's very
Yeah.
organized. I'm very proud of it, but I've, I've learned that over the years. Just organization is key. So when you get to the finish line and you don't know where everything is, that's a problem.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it where my move-in day is like butter.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the stuff that you're finding, like every time you go to Goodwill to shop for the cabin, that's a reel. That's story content. That's like,
Okay.
that's all
All right.
content. Even going through the stuff that you've collected so far, take us on a little tour. It could be in a story.
Okay.
You could make a reel about your best vintage finds for your cabin so far. Like, all of
Can
that
I
is
just
good
hire you,
content.
Janice? Can you be my social girl?
I will move to Michigan and I will happily share what you're doing.
No,
But
I think that's my biggest shortcoming is the social side. I feel very competent in everything else, but the marketing of like getting eyeballs on what I'm doing, that's the scariest part.
yeah. And I think a reframe there for, and this is not just for you, for like everyone who's intimidated by that. The getting started is very hard because we're thinking about it as marketing. If instead you just think about like, I have my 35 friends who want to know what's going on. Let me just share with them what's going on. Think of it as like community or like storytelling,
Okay.
right? And then
Yep.
it's like, okay, I don't need to be perfect to show up. I'm not marketing. I'm just storytelling. That's fine. And then
Okay.
it like removes all that pressure. And it's again,
Okay.
if you're not going for shiny, then it isn't, it's story. It's just like bringing us
Yeah.
along for the ride.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm internalizing that. And yeah, I just need to do it. It's one of those things that's like another element of running this type of a business that you just have to learn.
Yeah. And I
Thank
will
you.
say, like,
Pep
once you start sharing, if you shared today, let's just say, I'm not telling you have to do this, but let's say today you
talk.
decided to share some of your favorite vintage finds for your cabins. And people are going to start commenting on it and you're going to get DMs about it. And that becomes motivating. You're like, oh,
Okay.
people do like it when I show up. And then it makes you think about what else you want to share.
Mhm.
And so before you start, you're not seeing any of that positive reinforcement. But once you start to get that. And that I think makes it way easier to show up the next day.
Yeah.
So it's
We are
just,
millennials after all. We need that, the validation.
that's right. That's right. And social media is a great place for us to find that.
Yeah.
Jess, this is
Yeah.
just as
So,
great as I imagined. I'm very excited to see how this goes.
oh, thanks, Janice. At least it makes me feel good that you care and that you're watching. So I will make all this for you.
Okay. Thank you. I can't wait to see it. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.